All right, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to the first Coast to Call Talk of 2022. Very excited to be back. Thanks everyone for coming. What was that? Yeah. So first, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the country that I currently reside on. So for me, I'm on the Sunshine Coast, so it's the Gubbi Gubbi or Kapi Kapi people. So I just want to show my respects to all elders, past, future, present, and future. So tonight's event is marine debris. So it's with our good friend Pablo Consolida. Just want to run through a few things before we get started. So for those of you who aren't sure who we are, Reef Tech Australia is a non-for-profit organization, and we believe in protecting reefs and oceans through citizen science. So me, I'm a reef ambassador, for example, and we do things like go to events and workshops and organize this talk every month. And our aim is basically community outreach and to educate the public and to empower people. We also have survey divers, like you see one of our survey divers on the right. And we have sites all across Queensland where we monitor the reef health, and we also have a few sites in Western Australia. So we're active in monitoring our reefs as well. So a few housekeeping rules before we get started. If everyone can please just have their videos off and have their microphones on mute, just so everything runs smoothly and we have no problems with internet and all of that. If you want updates from Reef Check, you can get on our mailing list. So you just email ceqevents@reefcheckaustralia.org. You can be added to our monthly e-news, so to get any updates about any upcoming events or anything like that. If you have any questions, just feel free to just leave them in the chat. So we're gonna have time for questions at the end of the talk. But if any questions crop up underway, just feel free to leave them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. I will also be taking a group photo before we start the talk. So if anyone's a bit shy, if anyone wants to stay anonymous, then please just feel free to turn your camera off or change your name. So some of our upcoming events, we have Your Mates Brewery Raffle Sundays. So this is a new event hosted by Your Mates. And it's basically live music, and there's a raffle, so there's a chance to win some cool prizes. I believe they had their first raffle Sunday this past Sunday, actually, and you see the dates when we'll be attending there. And we also have a new fundraiser happening. We've signed up with a zero waste company called Zero Co, and we have a fundraising program called $10 Million Give-a-thon. And for those of you who are not familiar with Zero Co, they're a great company. They sell self-care and house cleaning products, and it's all packaged in recycled plastics taken from oceans, beaches, and landfills. And it's all delivered to your door without the use of any single-use plastics. So if you want to give up single-use plastics, then grab your box of Zero Co. We also have Cleanup Australia Day. That's at La Balsa Park at March the 6th. And we also have a lot of cleanups going on. So we're always looking for volunteers who can help with our beach cleanups and our snorkel cleanups and all of that. And if you want to get more involved, you can always volunteer with Reef Tech. We've got an ambassador program starting in May, I believe. you start training new ambassadors. And if you're a scuba diver, you can do a survey training, so you can become a reef survey. For that, you do need an advanced open water or equivalent and 25 log dives. That's a great opportunity to really get involved in some citizen science. And for the ambassador, you need no experience. You don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to be a scuba diver. You don't need anything. You can be just a normal person who wants to just get involved and make a difference. And of course, if you want more updates, anything Reef Check, please follow us on any of the social medias. And a quick thank you to all of our sponsors. We are a non-for-profit organization, so we do rely heavily on sponsors. So there's the Sunshine Coast Council, Clean Water Group, there's the City of Gold Coast, Port of Brisbane, Mask Events, and the Council. Thank you to all you. We could not do what we're doing if it wasn't for these sponsors. And of course, thank you to all of our lovely volunteers who really keep the show running here at Reef Check. Special thank you to everyone who's involved in organizing the Coast to Coal talks here with me as well. So on to our speaker of tonight. So if you've attended any Coast to Coal talks in the past year, this will be a familiar face to you. Pablo is a fellow Reef Check ambassador. He's also a student currently undertaking a double degree in animal ecology and business, and he's focusing on tourism, leisure, and events management at the University of the Sunshine Coast. And like I said, he is also a Reef Check ambassador, and he holds several jobs at the university, including being a research assistant under Professor Thomas Schlacker, who is a professor in marine science, focusing on beach ecology. So with that, I think I'll hand it over to Pablo.
Thanks, Erland. Did you want to take a photo before we get started?
Oh yeah, the photo.
I always forget about it too.
Let's do the photo. All right, so everyone who wants to have their face shown, turn on the camera.
I love your background, Peter. It's a very cool dive photo.
Cheers, thank you.
There we go, all the lovely faces. Beautiful.
It's good to know I'm not talking to just black screens.
Great, so everyone just give a big smile. Oh, there's Lindsay. All right, there we go, excellent. All right, all yours, Pablo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me just get to sharing my screen. Hope everybody's enjoying their evening so far. Cool. I hope everybody, yeah, okay, you can see my application. So welcome to the talk, Marine Debris and How to Keep Your Beach Clean. My name's Pablo, and as Ellen said, I'm a research assistant. I've been a research assistant for about a year now. I started this stuff in December of 2020. And one of the first projects I begun on was marine debris, plastic pollution. Thomas Schlacker, who's my supervisor, decided that with all of these beaches, marine debris was heavily understudied in literature. And it was just one of the forefront things and one of the most pressing things that we should be researching today. So he decided to dive in on it. And we've been working on plastics and studying it for a year and a bit now, since December 2020. We've worked over several different projects trying to answer lots of questions. which I'm about to show you. So let's dive on in. So why are we mapping the coast beaches? I'm based in the Sunshine Coast. So when we talk about the coasts, I'm talking about the Sunshine Coast. It has 60 Ks of beach. And I just wanted to throw a couple of facts in there. Not too many to not bum everybody out, but I'm sure everybody's well aware about the problems with plastic pollution and marine debris in the world. It's pretty big right now. And the scary thing is, even though we're researching this and finding so much plastic, the problem is only going to get worse and worse over time. So with some studies, 4.8 to 12.7 million metric tons, MT, are entering the ocean annually. And a study by Five Gyres Institute, which was also in the I think it was around 2015, they surveyed a bunch of different places all over the globe, and they estimate that 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic are just floating on the surface. That's not counting everything that falls down, nanoplastic and microplastic also that's underneath that surface layer. So there's a lot of plastic, and I'm sure we've all heard of the statistics out there saying that by 2040 or 2050, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. So this is a pretty big problem that the world is facing right now. And I'm super, super lucky and blessed to be able to have the opportunity to be researching this. So for a while, I've been wanting to share all of the awesome things we've been doing. And tonight I get to. So why? These are 3 reasons right here. But there are also plenty of other reasons. The Sunshine Coast is a very tourism heavy place. It relies on national and international tourism to come in here, from Noosa to Mooloolaba. And the thing that the Sunshine Coast is most proud about is literally in its name, the coast. And plastic is something that does harm that. It has a lot of indigenous significance as well as ecological significance. There are several animals like these 3 here. You might not be able to even recognize it, but that photo on the right is a shorebird. It's dead, obviously, and all of that rubbish was found inside of its stomach. So shorebirds, turtles, dolphins, marine invertebrates are kind of the guys that are getting hit the worst by all of this pollution. There's actually a study done by a PhD student just a couple of years ago who sampled a bunch of baby turtles and found in 100% of her sampled turtles, microplastic was found in their stomach. So microplastic has not only entered our ocean systems and stayed there, but it's entered animals and their life cycle being handed down from generation to generation, which is pretty awful. Plastic has been found in the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which is the world's deepest place on Earth. It's been found in the placenta of human mothers, which actually stops nutrients being transferred from a mother to a baby, leading to babies being born with deficiencies. So plastic carries a huge amount of problems on the environment and the animals that live inside it. So that's why, if that's not enough reasons. So I'm just going to dive straight in, really. Since September, we've been heading out and sampling specific beaches on the Sunshine Coast. We've sampled every site from Noosa North Shore all the way down to Mooloolaba at least once, if not several times. And the hopes on what we were trying to do is create a map of plastic. So we'd head out. On some days, we would bring a GPS with us. And as you can see, every time we picked up a piece of plastic, we would hit a GPS button, and that would pinpoint the location. We would go out with about 3 researchers. And on some of the trips, we actually used the community to help us out there. And on this day alone, we picked up 1,500 pieces. And we overlaid it on Google Maps to get some information on where and when you pick up plastic. So the whole reason that Professor Schlacher started this is because we see a lot of community organizations and NGOs like Reef Check Australia, as well as Surfrider Foundation, Sea Shepherd, Sunshine Coast, all of these guys head out to the beaches and clean them monthly, as I'm sure most of you already know. And they do a really great job. A lot of people come along. Normally there's free barbecues and lots of food involved. And we just wanted to try and help these guys by trying to find out where plastic washes up, when it washes up, and how frequently it washes up, the best places to go and find them, so we can actually begin to start targeting where and when we go out. Because I'm sure if you guys have ever been out on the beach and tried to pick up rubbish, it's pretty harsh. You know, it gets really hot. It's really hard to find plastic, especially when you're walking long distances. So we just want to try and make that as easy as possible for people. So we've spent a lot of time. The first project we did actually, we picked up 59,000 pieces, and we took them all to a lab. We counted every single individual piece. We weighed everything, and we also gave them a couple scores to generate some metadata attached to every piece. So we could begin answering questions like, if this plastic came from those Great Pacific garbage patches that we hear about, if it was fresh plastic, which means like, let's say you could find a little piece of plastic down here from 7-Eleven, which is just a store over here, or maybe it has the brand of one of these waterfront shops down here. And if we find that on the beach, then we know it didn't come from the ocean and it came from people coming to the area, enjoying the area, but accidentally or purposely, unfortunately, leaving plastic on the beach. We wanted to try and determine where this plastic is coming from so we can try and stop it and slow it down at least a little bit. So we recorded weathering. We recorded if there was any biofouling on it. So how much algae or barnacles that are on these pieces of plastic. And we also recorded color to begin with. Got rid of that. And then obviously the total count. So there's a lot of stuff. We haven't actually published anything just yet, just because there's so much research and rubbish that we actually need to physically count. It's taken a really long time. And we've learned a lot about how to improve the way we research about it, and now how not to bite too much off, if that makes sense. A lot of effort and time has been put in by a whole group of people from USC. So a big shout out to them and everybody who comes out and helps us clean the beaches as well. But that brings me to this photo here. So this was taken in November when we went out and sampled. This was the project with GPSs. And just by looking at this, you can see it's really, really heavily polluted, this area. So I wanted to start off by one of the first drivers of plastic pollution, which is urbanization. A lot of people think that plastic only comes out from all of those fishing nets and trawlers, and everything comes from overseas or from other countries and washes up on our beaches. And this clearly tells a different story. You can see there's a heavy amount of plastic in this tiny little area here, which is the most common used area on this beach, Noosa Main Beach. You can also see that the headland here plays quite a large role. We did sample this area just at a later date. We just finished here for today. But what headlands, rocky headlands specifically do is they act like giant barriers for plastic. I'll give you some more examples on this in a second, but if you think about a rocky headland, when you're trying to find the best spot to go clean a beach, just try and think of it as a huge shield. What happens to plastic is it'll get washed in with surf, swell, and wind, which is the drivers of everything that pushes marine debris and organic material on beaches. But if you've got a really rocky headland, it just kind of hits that and keeps moving forward. So what'll happen, it'll keep moving around this headland and it'll mass right here. So this has double the amount that it should because it's the most popular area, but it's also right next to a headland. And I'll give you another example of that in just a second. So yeah, headlands and urbanizations are two major things that influence plastic. So when you're thinking about, hey, I want to go clean a beach, where do I do it? It's actually probably closer than you think. Just head to your most commonly used beach, maybe your local area that you love to go sunbathe. In Australia, between the flags, you'll find a lot of plastic, unfortunately. And you'll be able to go pick up heaps there in a short amount of time, which is awesome. This is Alexandria Headland in Maroochydore. And again, the drivers here that we can see are urbanization and headlands. So there's a rocky headland just here, which is Alexandria Heads. And you can see there's a huge amount of plastic right in the beginning of the beach just here. So you see a huge amount. You can actually, if you zoom in, see the different strand lines of where plastic washes up. Another really good tip when you're going out and cleaning beaches, if you're doing it by yourself, instead of just zigzagging back and forth and aimlessly wandering the beach, there is actually a spot where most of the plastic is that you will find, and that's called the highest strand line. A strand line is a line formed by waves when they wash up on the beaches. A beach acts like a giant sponge, really. So when you get a wave that comes in, obviously the swell is going to push it up on the sand, and it will also recede at the same time. But what happens is, because sand is porous, some water is actually going to sink through that sand. And when that water sinks down, anything that is at the front of that line of the wave is pushed up, and then it just stops. And it actually forms a really vivid line. So if you ever go out after high tide and you're there on low tide, you'll see that the beach is always covered with a bunch of lines. Those are strand lines. And the majority of plastic that you're going to find is in the highest strand lines. So the best time to go clean the beach is just after high tide, when the beach has formed a wonderful strand line, which is normally at the base of the sand dunes, or wherever you see that it's been last wet. That's where a lot of plastic is going to wash up. There will still be a lot of plastic on the lower strand lines, but the majority of plastic that we have found is on these high strand lines. So strand lines here are formed in the back, but there's a couple other strand lines that are there as well. And then for urbanization, again, unfortunately, it's right where the flags have been. So this is Alex Surf Club right here. Sorry for not getting some closer photos, but where everybody gets to enjoy their weekends is where all the plastic is found, unfortunately. And you can see it in the next surf club here. There's quite an abundance of plastic on different strand lines, but also just randomly. So in highly urban areas, obviously this entire beach is covered by houses. So this whole beach is used pretty frequently, and the distribution is kind of just random because you've got a lot of people walking up and down and just dropping rubbish where they see, which is pretty sad. So this was all cleaned up on the 13th of November last year, and 1,300 pieces were picked up, which is pretty awesome considering you go out, perform some research, and instead of us just counting birds or looking at crabs and what they do in their spare time, we're actually cleaning the environment as well. which is cool. So another big place that you find plastic is river mouths. So if you think about a beach and how it works, like I said earlier, wind and swell are the major drivers of plastic. So plastic is going to be traveling either on the surface or on the seafloor. It's going to be pushed up against the beach here. And normally, like in the Sunshine Coast, I'm pointing at my screen, but right here where my cursor is, the wind kind of pushes southeasterly most commonly during the summer. So plastic is going to continuously move back and forth up this beach, like a ladder almost. What happens when you get river mouths though, is you've got this giant hole in this perfect line of sand dunes. So you've got a normal amount of plastic on this beach, if you want to call that normal nowadays. And when you get a small hole in a perfect line, obviously stuff is going to end up sticking in there and staying in there. And I vividly remember this day, even though it was a couple months ago, because we spent probably an hour just in this one spot. We picked up 2,800 pieces. I personally picked up 1,100 pieces. I remember because that was a record for me for one cleanup. And we only did that in maybe 3 hours or 4 hours, excuse me. Unfortunately, we can't pick up every single piece. Like it says here, there was so much more rubbish there. There was so much microplastic. But what happens is these waves, they push it into this little area here, and they stay there until either a big weather event happens, and that will clean all of this out and push it back onto the beach. But it will then end up stuck between headlands anyway. So this is actually Stoomis Creek in Coolum Beach. If any of you are locals and you want to go out and clean the beach, they spelled Peridian wrong. I've just realized that. But that's Stoomis Creek. It's actually a dog beach. It's really commonly used. And if you want to head out there after a big weather event, weather is actually another big thing that I'll be talking about as well. Again, this is another example of headlands stopping plastic. Instead of it stopping it after the headland though, it actually traps it just before. So you'll see that action of plastic being washed across the beach, again, getting stuck in small creeks and river mouths, and then it actually congregating and all amassing in the beginning of headlands. So you'll actually find rubbish before and after headlands in abundance. There's heaps of them there. Our first study was on this beach from Urumba to Twin Waters to Maruchi River. I'll show you a couple of statistics on that soon, but there was heaps of rubbish always found in the beginning of our sampling times, which was right in this headland. There's actually a small river, a creek there as well. So those two factors make it a double whammy and they make it worse. This just further supports the argument of creeks being a major trap. You can see this is in between Sunshine Beach and Peridian Beach. All of these creeks are clearly marked here. And there's a bit of a close up just here. Now this is all one, we call it a delta. And that just means that when you've got the perfect line of the beach, you can see that the sand dunes start to recede here and they stay a little bit further back and then they come back to normal here. And the data that we had here, once we overlapped it on Google Maps, we were very happy because it produced exactly what we thought it would. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of southeasterly wind driving plastic up the beach. So instead of a lot of plastic being here, wind has pushed it to the other side of the creek, and it hasn't left this creek delta. So it's still within the range of the creek. It's being impacted by the creek's topography, and it's getting trapped here. And it's not moving further forward simply because it's hitting those high strand lines and it's staying there. So yeah. So what types of debris did we find? This was the original group, and that's Professor Schlacher. Probably doesn't want me showing this photo, but it's a big thank you to everybody who was involved in the group: Jordan, Marty, Artie, and Georgia. Georgia Collins was a student of Professor Schlacher last year. She completed an honors thesis on marine debris with him, and she actually almost individually counted 59,000 pieces of plastic in the lab, and she counted all of the metadata that I told you guys before: weather, biofouling, color, weight, and then counting every single piece. So everything that we picked up totaled to 56,000 grams, and that was only on 12 kilometers of beach. And we went out there and sampled it 32 times in every different weather condition over summer. So this happened between December 2020 and January 2021. We covered a total of 354 kilometers, and we began at 4 a.m. every single day because we wanted to get out there before anyone else did, as soon as there was light, to try and get there before you amazing people did, because we wanted to be the first ones to clean it, and we wanted to get an accurate measure of how much plastic washed up every single day to try and determine what the average amount of plastic washed up daily was. And we found out a lot of pretty cool things, actually. So weather is a major driver in where plastic comes in as well. All of those things that I showed you guys earlier: creeks, headlands, urbanization, they're all factors, but weather is probably the biggest thing. Wind and swell are the two major drivers. So when you get lots of easterly wind on the east coast of Australia, you get a lot of plastic washing in from those ocean gyres that we hear so much about. You can pretty much think about it in your head when you have a giant circle, which is a gyre. It's driven by oceanic currents. And the only way plastic is going to get out of that is if something pushes it out. And wind is what does that. Wind drives swell, and swell picks up everything on the top of the surface, as well as a couple of things that are in the water column, and it'll push it up against the beach. And the only way we found that out was because we counted biofouling and weathering of every single piece. And when we compared our data with weather data and found the days where there was heavy easterly winds, we found a lot, if not the majority of plastic, was covered in algae. It was heavily damaged. It was sunburnt. It might fragment if we touched it, and it had barnacles all over it. And these are all tiny little clues that we were able to help tell us if this plastic came from the ocean and roughly how long it was in the ocean for, or if it was fresh. And we got a lot of fresh plastic when we had a storm. In December the 16th and 15th of 2020, we had a big storm event. And what happens when storms come is they rain, obviously. And because we're in an urban area like Maroochydore, the rain actually washes plastic off the beaches. So you might go get your soy chai latte at wherever you do, the local coffee club or something like that. And on your way to work, try and throw it in the bin and accidentally miss it. And when it rains, that rain is literally just going to pick up that coffee cup, throw it in the gutter. It's going to hit a stormwater drain. That stormwater drain is going to take it right to a river. and that river is going to take it to the ocean. And like we've already learned, the ocean, because of swell and wind, is just going to push that plastic right up against the beach again. So what you'll end up with after rain events is a lot of fresh plastic. And that's where we were able to determine what types of debris we got, but also where it came from, which is really important information. I was listening to a podcast by the Ocean Cleanup Foundation. If none of you guys have heard them, they're probably one of the most forefront research teams in the world studying plastic pollution. And they go out and clean plastic in the middle of the ocean, in these ocean gyres. And what their results have found has supported what we've found. They find a lot of fishing materials in the middle of the ocean because that's where fishermen are and nothing else. But when they go and sample in rivers or on beaches that are along coastlines of countries, then they find a lot of localized plastic. So that's kind of how we determine the where plastic comes from question, which was pretty cool that we were able to figure that out. So what types of plastic did we find? This answers that. I'll let you guys soak up this graph. This hasn't been published yet, so it's not publicly available information. It was done by Georgia Collins, the girl on the previous graph. Hopefully it will be coming out as a scientific publication in the coming months. But the majority of materials that we found, 79.8%, was hard plastic. That's plastic that you can't bend. So food containers, this camera laptop bag right here, anything that you can't physically bend. And then soft plastic would be something, I don't have any nearby, but something that you can bend. And that took up only 10%. The rest was foam, probably from fishing, rubber, paper, fabric, and there was a little bit of glass as well. So that 79% accounted for, I think it was 42,000 pieces of the 59,000 that we picked up. So this donut graph shows the amount by counting. That's more than 75% being just hard plastic, coming from all of those things that we have in our lives, from water bottles that break down to bags and everything. But by weight, that story changes dramatically. And that's simply because things like glass, although it might make up 0.2% of the type, it's a really heavy item. So it makes up 16% of the total weight that we sampled. And the majority of glass that we found was mainly beer bottles, with people enjoying a couple of beverages on the beach and unfortunately forgetting them to take it off the beach. So the use and application was something that we also recorded. So on all of the pieces we picked up, we categorized them by item type or composition, because we wanted to find out where exactly everything was coming from. Unfortunately, like we learned, 80% of the stuff was literally just plastic fragments. So we weren't able to find out too much. But something that I was super surprised with personally was the number one item we found by count was actually drink containers, specifically plastic lids. So literally anything from a nozzle, but it would normally just be the tip lid, something from a milk container, a breaker bottle. And I asked myself the question, why are we finding more lids than actually bottles? And the reason is because plastic lids are really thick, which means they take a lot longer to break down. And unfortunately, the bottles themselves break down quicker than the lids do. So we end up finding a heap of lids on the beach, and only a little amount of actually water bottles, milk bottles, and stuff like that. The second most common item that we found was fishing materials. So this was a lot of recreational fishermen that use the coastline to try and catch a feed, which is fair enough. But this further supports the argument that the plastic we find on the beach doesn't come from those huge fishing vessels. We didn't find any big trawler nets. We found maybe a couple of barrels that are used from, you know, deep sea fishermen and stuff like that. But majority of this was just basic fishing line, like Peter's background and stuff that recreational people use that may not dispose of them too practically. I won't go through everything else that we found, but it was a lot. And the risk to wildlife is something that we really wanted to focus on as well, because it's an important factor. And as ecologists, we want to find out how the environment is changing, but also the impact to animals that change has. So we found that 27% of all sampled things were a high risk to wildlife in mass, and 7% the account. Those are things like sharp objects, so broken glass bottles. It could also be biohazardous material, Band-Aids, condom wrappers, anything spicy that you can think of, really. If an animal were to ingest that, not only would they have problems just with filling up their stomach with something that isn't food, but it might actually slice open their internal organs, really, as they're eating it, which is pretty horrible. We also found some minor evidence of animals purposely eating plastic because it had sugar on it. And I thought this was super interesting. This is another thing we need to research. So if any of you guys feel like volunteering your time and coming and helping our team out, I'm all ears for that. But we found a lot of sugary milk drinks like Breaker or chocolate milk bottles with the indent of teeth marks from rodents who've actually just bitten away at these milk containers and then left half the bottle there. And the inside of these containers is lined with a sugary substance like chocolate milk or something like that. So we're now finding evidence of animals actually purposely eating plastic and ingesting it just because they get a little bit of a sugar hit, which is pretty horrible because that plastic normally stays in these animals and then they slowly starve to death because their stomachs are actually too full to eat anything else. I'm just reading a question from Lindsay. Would an all plastic technically be categorized as harmful to wildlife, even broken down identifiable type? How is it high, low, moderate, and high distinguished? So just as I was saying earlier, high would be something like a piece of glass, a shard, or a needle, where if a seagull ate it, it would literally slice open their throat immediately. Low would be something like hard plastic, where turtles and other reptiles can go for months with plastic inside their stomach and it not actually affect them a large amount. Obviously, I'm not an expert on this, and research itself still has so much to understand about how it affects wildlife, but this was just how we categorized it. They ingest it, do they die immediately, or can they continue living and die over a slow amount of time or die due to some other causes? So hopefully that answers your question, Lindsay. So this was another kind of answer to where does all this trash come from. This is external research. None of this was done by me or my research team. These are the guys that I was talking about a little earlier, the Ocean Cleanup. And they've been organizations since 2016, and they are amazing now. They already have giant ex-fishing vessels dragging these huge, pretty much fishnet looking things around the entire North Atlantic oceans in these oceanic gyres to pick up rubbish and take it back to the land and actually upcycle it, which I'll talk a little bit about earlier. But as I mentioned, this is quite a newly researched area, and every year we continue to understand it a little bit more. So in 2017, one of the first quality articles in academics was published saying that question is how many rivers are responsible for what share of plastic comes into the ocean? And these guys said that 10 rivers account for 90% of plastic that enters the ocean. So if you think about it, that's a pretty easy problem to solve. Just go to these 10 rivers. You either put plastic nets that stop plastic from pushing you any further, or you find another way. If you feel like looking up the ocean cleanup, they have these huge, awesome devices that direct plastic out of rivers called, I forgot what they're called. They start with I, interceptor. They're called interceptors. I think they have 5 or 6 now that are deployed all over the world. And what they do is they direct plastic out of the river, and it's this giant conveyor belt that picks up rubbish, stores it, and then you've got local partners coming and continuously managing that. And this was great news. We could only go to 10 rivers, target these areas specifically, and get rid of 90% of the plastic that enters the ocean. Because there's no point getting a boat out here and continuously picking up rubbish if it's just going to keep entering the ocean anyway. So we have to start thinking about how do we stop it before it enters the ocean. So again, in 2017, a different article said that 10 rivers only contribute to 56%. But in 2021, the latest study suggests that it's actually around 1,600 rivers. The ocean cleanup thinks that it's about 1,000 rivers that contribute to around 80 or 90% of the plastic that inputs the ocean. So we're constantly updating our knowledge on how the ecology of plastic works. And that's just the way science goes. It pretty much means that we try our best and we continuously update what we know, and then we can begin to target these things and tackle these problems better as every year passes. Another thing that this photo shows is they've actually put a plastic tracker on literally a milk container from the Dominican Republic. It's circled around America, and then it's headed out into these gyres that are found in the middle of the ocean. So it spent a lot of time literally just being pushed in circles by these ocean currents, which is what forms these gyres and traps them in the middle of the ocean. So the two choices that the plastic bottle has is either exit a river and get straight away pushed by some wind and swell back onto the beach, and for you lucky and amazing humans to go out and clean that and get rid of it from the natural environment, or we get unlucky and it exits a river and it stays in the ocean and it begins a huge journey. This piece itself, 114,000 kilometers, to only end up in the middle of the Atlantic. And obviously what that piece of plastic is going to do now is slowly get worn out over time by wave action. An animal might decide to pick at it and have some lunch on it, and it'll break down into microplastic and become an even bigger problem. If you want to learn more about this plastic tracker, the URL is just there. And if you haven't heard about the ocean cleanup, I highly recommend following them on Instagram, Facebook, or going to their website and seeing all of the awesome things they do. They're probably one of the most important companies that exists in today's society. And they aim to clean 90% of the plastic, I think, by 2040 out of the entire world. So if you're looking for a solid company to support without worrying about greenwashing or all of the other factors that come with environmental action, I strongly recommend the Ocean Cleanup. It was founded by a 16-year-old Dutch kid who makes me feel like I'm underachieving in life. In 2016, he just had a dream, and he now runs the company. He still runs it today, and they have a huge amount of resources, from environmental international lawyers to data analysts, and they've deployed interceptors in Dominican Republic. They're aiming for China, India, all of these rivers that spit out a large amount of plastic. So they've already begun targeting these top 10 rivers because 18% of plastic entering the ocean is still an enormous amount. In metric tons, it would be around 2 to 4 if we were to go by that earlier count of 12 metric tons entering the ocean any day. But how can you make a difference? So I'm bringing it to you guys now. Most of you guys would already do half of these things, but I do want to go through them quickly as well. So I've already talked a little bit about it. Stop it at its source is the number one thing you can do. And people simply don't understand. I think when someone asks me what's the number one thing I can do to stop climate change, is you have a lot of power in spending. When you go to the supermarket and you decide what product to purchase, you decide whether you want to purchase an environmentally conscious company, a company that upcycles. This phone case that I have is made from upcycled plastic. So this is plastic that could have been in the ocean. The Ocean Cleanup makes sunglasses. I had to go buy a hairbrush the other day because I couldn't find mine. And they're now making hairbrushes with recycled plastic. You can buy clothing with recycled plastic. Recycled plastic is now becoming almost a staple item in almost anything that you think of that's made up by plastic. And supporting these companies is super important because you're putting your money where your mouth is, and giving money to these companies only allows them to grow and to continue recycling plastic. And that's what a circular economy is. So if you Google circular economy, it's just about reducing the amount of waste that you have and using your money to purchase items that may have a second or a third life. So instead of, if you think about like a phone case, as I was showing you earlier, if you buy one that's made out of fresh plastic and it breaks and then it goes to the trash, that's just one life cycle. If you get an upcycled case like I have, you buy, well, somebody else buys a phone case, it breaks, but then they send it to a center to break it down and form another phone case. And then it re-enters that circle, which is why they call it a circular economy, because it can just continuously go round and round without you using new resources, which reduces the amount of resources that everybody uses, which means that we have less deforestation, hunting animals for chemicals, and all the bad things that you associate buying new things with. Supporting local is a huge one that is super easy. If you guys just go to your local farmers market on a Saturday or Sunday, I buy majority of my clothes now from op shops, and I've been doing that forever, not only because you're not buying new clothes in fast fashion accounts for a huge amount of CO2 emissions in the world, but also because it's cheap. And if you do it often enough, you end up finding all of the items that you need anyway, from quality Levi jeans to business shirts and anything that you can. My recommendation on op shops is if you're looking for a particular item, you're not going to find it in one day probably. So if you just end up visiting them once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks and having a quick browse, talking to some lovely old ladies and trying on some funky dresses and hats, you end up finding a lot of work. These two items that I'm wearing here are either those shorts are from Rip Curl and they're made from recycled plastic. And I was super happy when I saw them because it means you're not, when you're buying a new garment, you're not using as many resources. And that shirt is now my fieldwork shirt I got for like $2 at an op shop. So supporting local, super easy and super beneficial. The slogan of reduce, reuse, and recycle kind of fits into all of those things. Reduce buying things to stop it at its source and use your individual spending power. Reuse is the circular economy. Recycling is a huge one as well. And then the last one is to get active and engaged with your local community efforts. So Sea Shepherd Sunshine Coast or Surf Rider Sunshine Coast, as well as Reef Check, all hold almost monthly beach cleanups, as well as a bunch of other companies. I know there's an actual small family in the southern end of the Sunshine Coast. I forgot the name of their group, but they just felt like going and cleaning the beach every few weeks. So they started their own little non-profit organization. And now they host super cool events where they get local artists to come in. They've actually partnered with op shops. So if you go and pick up a bag of rubbish, then you get to go shopping for free, op shopping, which is cool. Thanks, Renee. It's Visionary Ocean Warriors, if you want to look them up. They're a super friendly crew. I highly recommend them. They're really cool. But if you don't have any local community efforts, if you're not in Australia, if you're from around the world, then start some. And that starts with you and deciding, you know, from all the information I've just shared with you guys, you know exactly when, where, and how to go pick up rubbish as efficiently as possible. Start with just bringing your friend, dragging your mum along, or your dad, or your siblings. And then you can begin to branch out of the community. And yeah. I've also received a message saying to keep an eye on council's websites. There's a beach cleanup program, which advertises all of the local organizations' upcoming beach cleanup events. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for giving up your Tuesday evening to hear me talk trash, literally. I'm very passionate about this weird area of research, but I think it's super important because, as I said earlier, the problem is only going to get worse in the future. And hopefully you all know how, or at least a little bit more than you did a couple hours ago on when you get onto the beach, how to clean it a little bit better. So yeah, that's all I got. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Thank you, Renee. I've also been looking forward to seeing the upcoming published articles. But if any of you guys are scientists, you'll know how slow science is because of how rigorous it is. So yeah, it'll happen eventually. Thanks for all the awesome comments, everyone. Really appreciate it. It's been a fun year and a half, really. I loved taking long walks on the beach beforehand anyway. So now when somebody asks what my job is, and I get to say taking long walks on the beach, and picking up rubbish and getting paid to do it, it's even cooler. If anybody is on the Sunshine Coast as well and they wanted to get involved, I'll post in the chat the app that we use. We use an app called Meetup. And the group that we currently named ourselves is Globe Ocean Beaches. If you're on the sunny coast and you want to become a part of making those awesome GPS maps that I showed you halfway through the talk, we may be holding some more future community events. If you download that app called Meetup Events and look up Globe Ocean Beaches, it'll notify you when you join the group. It'll notify you of upcoming events, and you'll get to meet my crazy supervisor.